Mojiang miners.
The Mojiang miners.
What are the Mojiang miners, and why is it important? Why does the whole world need to know about these Mojiang miners?
Well, it'll be very apparent after this wonderful episode. You'll understand that, and I'll explain. I'll give you a little synopsis before we dive into the real scary meat of this. The Mojiang miners were a mining group of people in China, and they contracted a SARS-like coronavirus respiratory illness.
Okay.
But let me tell you when they contracted it, because the viewers behind the screen might say, I contracted a SARS-like coronavirus respiratory illness. Yeah. But they contracted that in 2012.
Okay, so that's, yeah.
Now, they contracted it from bats. And the bats gave it to them in these caves where they were mining, right? Well, these shafts, right? It's beautiful out here, eh?
Yeah, we got another biker behind us, but yeah, you go past.
Sure. So anyway, when the information was released, Dr. Shizheng Li, which is the virologist that runs the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
So the bat woman.
Yeah, the bat woman in Wuhan, where the coronavirus started. She went down there and collected samples from them. Now, over the next 4 months, the workers, the miners, ended up either dying or ended up in the ICU.
Yeah,
right?
and
recovering, but a lot of them died. Very intense, serious problem, just like COVID-19, right? And it was actually, when they studied it, they brought the culture back, they brought the virus back to the lab in Wuhan. They basically stored it so that they could work on it. And coronaviruses are famous for being able to, alter protein spikes and basically manipulate them. Something that Peter Daszak, who you could probably explain who that is, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, well, recently the WHO went to do this sort of investigation in Wuhan to try and figure out the origins of the coronavirus. It's a farce, basically, but he's the only US-based scientist that was on the team. Also turns out he's also the only US-based scientist who actually has massive ties with the Wuhan Institute of Virology and all that, but we'll get into that later. But that's who he is. And he's a brilliant virologist in his own right, but unfortunately, he's kind of, at least all indicators point to the fact that he's paid and bought for, by China, by the CCP. Yeah.
So Peter basically worked with Dr. Shizheng Li on these coronaviruses and had funding going to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Peter's also the guy that said that it probably didn't come from China or Wuhan, and it's probably from frozen seafood. So the smoking gun really is all of the work he's already done on coronaviruses, okay?
Yeah, so he's worked on pretty much a SARS, coronavirus, the same as COVID-19 almost. It's obviously not exactly the same, but more or less the same, contracted by human miners in Mojiang, transported those samples back, those cultures of that virus, back to the Wuhan lab of virology, which is very close to where the outbreak happened,
And so what we wanted to do is this needs more eyes, and we found some absolutely unbelievably damning stuff. So no one's going to do it, then if mainstream media is not going to do it, then you guys watch for yourself. Enjoy.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know about you, C-Milk, but I have some issues with ethics when it comes to medical trials.
Okay. And why?
I feel like if you're going to take part in a medical trial, especially when it's some kind of a experimental vaccine, that you should be able to at least consent.
Yeah, I think everyone would agree with that. Not only that, I think everyone in the governing bodies of the medical sphere would agree with that around the world.
So who are we looking at here?
This is Liu Jingzhen.
Yeah.
And Liu Jingzhen is, let me get his title correctly.
Okay. Yeah, we wrote
He
it
is
down.
the chairman and secretary of the party committee. So he's a party member.
Yeah.
Chairman and secretary of the party committee of China's National Pharmaceutical Group Company Limited.
Yeah. I got to tell you guys, if anyone's in any kind of a position, really, in any kind of government position, if you're a
a manager at a government office or in a hospital or in a police, anything, you are a party member automatically. You cannot get that position if you're not a party member.
Correct.
Anyone in the government is going to be a party member, but he's kind of like a higher level party member.
Right.
Anyway, he released a statement.
Yeah, I'll just translate it for you guys.
Okay, let's bring it up.
We should have translated this previously, but anyway, we could do it on the fly.
Yeah.
So this guy basically says that it's safe. The vaccine, China's coronavirus vaccine, is going to be safe for 3 to 17-year-olds. Now, that in itself is not alarming. That's just a statement, right? But then he follows up with this by saying, give me a sec. He follows up by saying that the trials, the clinical trials for the 3 to 17-year-olds
were successful.
And they were not really different from the 18 to 59-year-old trials.
Yeah.
So in that statement, he's just not insinuated. He said that 3 to 17-year-olds were part of clinical trials for the coronavirus vaccine.
Yeah.
3-year-olds.
3-year-olds, yeah.
And this is something I want everyone to get. You can go on a spiel about that.
By the way, the source of this is a Chinese government website.
Chinese.
Oh, it seems safe between 3 to 17-year-olds because the clinical trials on 3 to 17-year-olds proved no big issues. Now, why would anyone allow their 3-year-old child to be part of a clinical trial for an untested vaccine? You got to either be very immoral or someone who only cares about money and not care about your children. I certainly wouldn't allow my child to be part of that trial.
Yeah, but you understand that a lot of these people are very undereducated, right? This lost generation of people. So if they're taking care of a 3-year-old, right?
Yeah.
Hypothetically, they don't know what the potential fallback from this is.
Yeah.
They don't understand. I mean, you have an entire generation of people that barely went to school.
I mean, look, I do actually understand it. And the reason, again, I'm going to pull this out, I used to train doctors, okay? My wife is a doctor, a Chinese doctor. But just the experience that both of you and I have had going to hospitals and stuff is there's a huge amount of ignorance behind how medicine works.
Sure.
And the reason I say this is that antibiotics is used as a cure-all for everything.
I say this every time, but when I broke my knee, they gave me antibiotics.
Yeah, they gave you because you broke your knee.
And I didn't have an infection.
No, you just broken it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. When I went as part of when I was training the doctors for the Universiade in Shenzhen, it was this big event. It was kind of like the Olympics, but for universities. I went to their big new medical facility they'd set up with the most high-tech equipment. They had this massive big x-ray machine they put me on, and you lie there and it moves you around and like scans your entire body for breaks in your bones and stuff.
CT scan,
Yeah. It was weird. It wasn't like you lie in like a plate and the plate moves backwards and sideways.
Oh, it's
and
like
it
an
was
X-ray, yeah.
But it was a very fancy
Sure.
one. They had all the fanciest, best equipment ever. I went in there to pretend that I had a sprained ankle. That was my whole thing. And because the whole point is they're supposed to be dealing with international athletes.
Sure.
So I had to pretend I can't speak Chinese, right? And I went to the doctors and I'm coming, my foot hurts, etc. So they put me on this x-ray machine. They take me and sit me down with the doctor to consult me. And he tries in his very poor English to figure out what's going on. Guess what he gave me for my sprained ankle?
Antibiotics.
He gave me antibiotics.
Yeah.
And I was like, first of all, I was allergic to that particular antibiotic that he gave me.
Right.
And second of all, you don't need antibiotics to treat a sprained ankle.
No shit.
But China just drifts by on luck because during the Universiade, the only thing that happened was one of the athletes got heat stroke. That was it. Because if anyone had actually been injured and been treated by these doctors, and you could say it's a failure on my point because I was training them, I was doing these massive intensive training courses with all the hospitals around the city. It was a huge thing that I had to do. But the fact of the matter is that they messed up something that simple, giving me an antibiotic that I'm allergic to for something that doesn't need an antibiotic. It just blew my mind. But here's the thing, guys. Antibiotics are so abused that you'll get a middle-aged woman going in. I've seen it a lot of times, and my wife's told me about this a lot, and the other doctors too. Will go in there with a cold, and she'll be like, give me antibiotics.
Cold.
Yeah, give me antibiotics. Yeah. And they'll be like, okay, but it's not good for you. Give it to me. Okay, fine. And they're cheap. They cost like 10 RMB or 5 RMB.
Less,
and then, 2 RMB, and you get a bag, an IV bag, and you go sit on one of those wooden chairs.
Yeah.
Okay, those terrible things. Sit in a wooden chair.
In public in front of the window so everyone sees you getting your IV.
With an IV drip of antibiotics. So when you have this kind of ignorance surrounding medicine, it makes sense that the occasional person wouldn't think it's weird to give their 3-year-old an experimental vaccine. They
Sure.
probably think, oh, it's good they get a vaccine.
And this is what always bothered me is that China's, running level 4 virus labs, and they're running massive medical trials with huge funding from around the world. And again, the scientists themselves have very good understanding, right?
Yeah.
But as a general populace, in terms of like where we're at and with medical technology and stuff, I mean, we're way behind in China. And when you have a situation like this, where it beggars belief the lack of morals that you need to have to accept a child patient from 3 to 17 to go get an experimental vaccine.
Experimental vaccine trial, yeah.
With a vaccine that has such a low efficacy rate already.
Yeah.
Just to rush it out so you can say, listen, we did it first. Remember when China said, let's not turn this into vaccine diplomacy? Proceeds to literally turn it into vaccine diplomacy.
That's just their way of trying to stall everyone else. Like, just don't worry about it. Don't do it. Meanwhile, they're like, I got to finish it,
My point is, the biggest thing that I learned from this is, and I know some of the horrible things that happen in the medical field in China. It's some really horrific stuff.
Sure.
But that he was so apt and ready to go out there and say, we finished clinical trials with 3-year-olds. Thinking that that's probably not a big deal, that no one's going to point that out, like people like us aren't going to notice something like that.
Yeah.
Come on, dude.
Yeah.
Like, no one in the rest of the world in the medical community is going to sit on that and think that's kosher.
Correct.
You know what I mean? And that leads us into something else.
Yeah.
That we're going to, I'll be honest with you, this might be the last time we talk about this whole coronavirus thing, because the ball's in the rest of the world's court at this point.
Yeah.
But this is the last thing we'll hand to you on a silver platter, okay?
Yeah.
Let's remind you guys, first of all, what happened here. WHO gets 1 year. China gets 1 year, right? They get 1 year to clean everything up or do whatever they want to do. They stall the WHO for 1 entire year because the WHO needs to get into Wuhan and figure out why coronavirus happened, why
Correct.
COVID-19 happened. Simple as that, right? They get a whole year. Finally, Peter Daszak goes in he leads the investigation team in Wuhan. They go into the lab. They go into the wet market. The wet market has already been cleaned completely. The animals that were being sold there are not being sold there anymore. They did swab tests of these animals, and they're like, yep, no coronavirus on these. Right?
Sure.
Because at the end of the day, China's been pushing the narrative that coronavirus didn't start in China.
And we pointed it out last week, and everybody has to understand this. Peter Daszak guy was the only US-based representative to be part of this investigation team. He is also somebody who has decades of collaboration with the Wuhan lab of virology, where everyone is kind of expecting this probably originated from.
Sure.
If it wasn't just cross species naturally, the other big theory is that it came from this specific lab.
Sure.
He has personal and financial interest in that lab.
Who is Shizheng Li?
Yeah, which is the doctor who was working on all the bats,
scientist,
working on the bats.
She's called the Bat Lady. Sorry, I'm just saying.
Yeah, Dr. Shizheng Li, scientist. Anyway, you can be called doctor if you're a doctorate in mathematician.
I'm aware. I just didn't want people to think she was like a medical doctor.
No, she's not. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, the fact of the matter is, this guy worked with her and has a lot of personal ties to everyone involved, and that's why, first of all, he shouldn't have been on this trip because of those personal ties. It's a conflict of interest. Yeah. He cannot be like open and fair and objective and independent when it comes to his investigation, because he's basically
15 years with Shizheng Li.
He's basically going to his friend's
house
and going in there and saying like, hey, I'm supposed to like look for drugs in your house, but
we're cool.
Don't worry about it. I know I can see them all over there. Just quickly put them away. I won't tell anyone. You know what I mean? That's basically what happened with this guy.
Yeah, so China blames 8 to 10 countries around the world for coronavirus. Yeah. They expect the rest of the world to be like, oh, that's cool, just keep blaming us, China. Yeah. They blame Italy, they blame India, they blame Japan, they blamed Australia, they blame the US. At this point, and it's not tabloid, this is the state. The Chinese state was blaming these countries for coronavirus when it's very clearly started in Wuhan. Right, let's be totally
that's where
honest.
It came from.
It's gotten to the point where it's become almost prejudice or racist to insinuate that it came from Wuhan, which baffles me because it's just scientific evidence at this point.
It doesn't baffle me. It shows you once again how the CCP is using Western social media and Western media against the West. They've turned this on its head and somehow insinuated, like you said, that it's racist to say that the virus originated from the place that it originated in.
Right.
And at the same time, it's totally okay to say the UK strain or the South African strain or whatever. That's totally fine.
The thing is, and I'm not even talking about on a personal level. Like, let's say we're just two blokes chatting about coronavirus, and we're like, "Yeah, I hear that came from Wuhan." That's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
If you want to go out there and be like a social justice warrior or something and say, "Listen, we shouldn't say that it came from there because it damages Asian people or something," right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's fine. That's up to you. The real importance of this is it's become prejudiced and inappropriate to say that it came from Wuhan in the medical and scientific field.
Yeah.
When you insinuate as a scientist with tons of collaborative effort
Yeah.
from other scientists that are putting out research papers that are coming out like wildfire right now, by the way.
Yeah.
Because there's people that are just baffled at this investigation. Actual scientists that can break down DNA.
Sure.
Right. They're coming together saying, like, listen, they can't get any headway because the media won't touch it. They can't get funding. They can't do any of this stuff because people are too scared to say that it came from Wuhan in the scientific field,
Well,
right?
Biden signed that you're not allowed to say that if you work in government or whatever,
Sure.
you're not allowed to
Right, and that's-
call it a Chinese virus or
virus.
a Wuhan flu or
Right.
anything. It's actually now law.
Right, and that's the problem is that that's gone past, okay, limit what people can say because maybe it instigates bad feelings amongst each other. We're talking about at a top level now,
Sure.
where people need to talk about the origins of
Yeah,
it because
you
that's
have
how we
to.
prevent it in the future.
Yeah.
So to start this all off, this is what we've found.
Mm-hmm.
We just wanted to remind you guys and catch you guys up that this guy has deep ties with Zhejiang Li and the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Yes.
This is well documented. It's all over the
What
internet.
we're about to show you is footage that's basically been uncovered by us and people that are helping us,
Sure.
and this is going to prove that this guy Peter Daszak is a liar and he contradicts himself.
Sure.
And this is the important part because the entire investigation hinges on him.
Sure. I
At
should
the end of
say
the day.
he contradicts his own organization.
Absolutely.
In the messages that they've been saying.
Well, he contradicts himself.
Sure. Well,
Yeah.
let's go. We want to remind everyone, if you haven't watched the episode previously, this is what he said to the BBC. So
Yeah.
we'll let you guys watch this
Okay.
first.
Listen very closely to that press release. What you will find is that there is a clear indication of supply chains going into that market that take you from places where SARS-CoV-2 relatives are into that market. So there are supply chains going in from other countries as well, and there are reservoirs, animals that we know are susceptible to related viruses. Evidence of that was found in frozen food in that market. That was clearly stated in the press conference just then. I think that's a clue as to how something might have got in. We also know about the cold chain work, and there are also other ideas on the table. I think that, you heard the opinion of the team that spoke about the whole group and our opinion on the various hypotheses, and I think it stands alone as it is.
Given that this report rules out a lab leak, isn't your credibility on that a little undermined by the fact that you've been saying that even before you came here?
No. What you find here is a very large group of experts have looked at this. They've been to the various labs around the region, talked to people, asked critical questions, got critical answers, and they've come to their conclusion, and I have as well. And what they say is extremely unlikely, and that stands alone.
All right.
Now, with Peter, this is the issue here. Peter basically, a long time ago, he said it was, what was the word he used? He said it was like reprehensible or heinous. I think he used the word heinous.
Right.
When people said, well, there's a level 4 biolab
Yeah.
where the head scientist, Zhejiang Li,
Yeah.
works on
Bat-derived
coronaviruses.
Yeah.
And she goes and gets bats from around China and studies the transmissibility of coronaviruses from bats into humans. And that lab is next to a wet market where they sell animals. And the initial outbreak happened in Wuhan.
Yeah. In that wet market where that lab is. Yeah.
And then that huge banquet that was put on by the government and promoted everyone eating out of the same dishes and everything at the same time. One of these things is probably what happened here, right? It's just kind of common sense, right? Occam's razor.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, when Peter goes and says way back before they go to the lab, that it's heinous to insinuate that it could potentially be an error. We're not talking about bioweapon here.
No, just
talking about an error.
Yeah.
Potentially, it could have been an error that like somebody contracted it in the lab,
Yeah.
or it leaked out, or through the garbage, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
It's heinous to even insinuate that there needs to be an investigation.
Sure.
It's heinous to even think that this lab that studies that very coronavirus has anything to do with this. That's heinous, right?
Yeah.
So the scientific community, not me, the scientific community, by the way, says that's a bit ridiculous.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's a little ridiculous. This head virologist, Peter Daszak, is going out there saying this already.
That's because his mates are
Well,
the
of
ones who
course.
run the lab.
Of course, we've come to that conclusion.
Sure.
But number two, they got a year
To clean up.
to clean up, and the CCP goes and talks to everyone in that lab.
Now,
The people that were originally missing still haven't turned up, by the way.
No, they haven't.
That would be a really easy way to prove this, right?
sure.
So that's the first thing, but that's something that can't be proven because what are they going to let a third-party scientist go in there and check it out, right? No. The real problem that you can prove, the fallacy here, is that Peter says that they are kind of going on the lines of China's original theory, which is it came from seafood. Not just from China, but he also
Southeast
mentions
Asia.
from Southeast Asia. He specifically says from other countries, and it's very key in China's whole play on this whole coronavirus thing. It can't come from China.
Comes from other countries.
They started with demonizing Wuhan.
Yeah.
This is how the CCP worked. They were like, Wuhan, you effed up, and then they told the whole world, and including Chinese people,
They
Wuhan,
called
it's
it-
their
they
fault.
called it the
It's
Wuhan
Wuhan
coronavirus.
virus.
Yeah.
Wuhan, you're terrible. They fired all these people. They're like,
Yeah, they
you guys
jailed
jailed you,
the top guys who were trying to hide it and stuff. That's the thing. It was Wuhan in the beginning, and then China realized, hang on,
They're like, we can milk this.
yeah, we've got to deflect this away
Yeah.
from China completely. So now the fact of the matter that the WHO's investigation, their sort of end thing that they came out with was it's probably from imported seafood.
Frozen seafood. Now, never mind them.
Yeah.
The FDA has said that it's virtually impossible, pretty much,
Sure.
to get coronavirus from packaging or food.
Yeah.
It's just not how it spreads. It's a respiratory illness, right? And you get it through what me and you are doing right
Sure.
now. There's flecks of spit that are going into
Breathing
each
and
other's
stuff
mouths.
around
It
you.
sounds
It's
gross.
disgusting, yeah.
But that's what's happening, and that's
Sure.
how you get coronavirus, pretty much.
Human beings are disgusting.
They are. Now, the WHO
Yeah.
themselves back in August said there is no evidence
Mm-hmm.
that coronavirus is being transmitted by food, okay?
Yeah.
And also, the WHO at this point they're pretty staunch on where this kind of came from,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
They were like, this is just not how it's going to be. They don't want people freaking out over this, like
Sure.
handling food and stuff. There's enough paranoia surrounding this. The scientific community basically said this is respiratory, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, Peter, after the entire investigation, without any evidence, because they swabbed all the animals, came to the conclusion as, yeah, it's probably, we're looking into this, supply chains of frozen food.
Yeah.
After they've already said that that's not the case, and multiple governing bodies around the world have said
Yeah.
the same thing. If you go to the next slide, it gets even more damning.
Yeah. Let's do it.
So this is an interview with Peter. I believe this was maybe March or something, but anyways, in 2020, okay?
Yeah.
And he got his grant suspended for the research he was doing, okay?
Yeah.
Now, Peter and the WHO, basically, they're insinuating that they haven't found the natural reservoir for the coronavirus, right?
Yes, yeah.
Now, they have bats that they've been working, they even had patented cages to breed bats in the virology lab, by the
Sure.
way. They know that we know that it's probably bat-derived, right?
Sure.
Now, I say probably because they've backtracked on this, and they're like, we need to find the natural reservoir probably in this frozen food from different countries, right?
Yeah.
But let's look at this interview here. Can you read what? I'll be the host. How have you been doing since your grant was suspended?
It's just very difficult and disappointing and worrisome time. I've lost people that I know to COVID-19. It's a bat origin coronavirus. We should have been there trying to find out why this thing emerged. And right now I'm sat in my house, looking out the window, unable to do this work because the NIH has told us that it's not appropriate. It's extremely frustrating.
You getting any hypocritical vibes going on here?
Yeah, he
right
says
now?
right there, it's
so
a
it's
bad
because of the
origin
Western.
coronavirus.
Yeah, it's the Western funding that it got cut
Yeah,
off.
it's-
That's why he can't do it.
Yeah.
It's not the CCP. It's not
Yeah.
China. And he fully admits it is a bat origin coronavirus.
Yeah.
But oh wait, the natural reservoir hasn't been found.
No.
It wasn't from the seafood market. It wasn't from Hunan seafood market.
No.
And it wasn't a lab leak that was studying.
No,
bat-derived
it's some
coronaviruses.
imported seafood.
Go to the
Was
next
it like
slide.
these amazing dead fish particles floating around in the air? You know,
Someone's gonna get in trouble for making that statement, by the way.
I believe so.
Okay, so the next paragraph, and this is his interview with Nature magazine, okay?
Yeah, I'll take us out so you can read it.
It says, what is the aim of the project that's been affected?
We have specific aims to go into rural regions of China to find bat origin coronaviruses and determine which ones are high risk. Then to work with local communities in rural China in 5 provinces. We target communities that are at high risk for viral spillover and see whether they're getting infected. And then finally see whether people are getting sick from novel coronaviruses.
Well, do we have to say much there?
No.
Okay, guys, let that sink in for a second. We know that it's a bat-derived coronavirus. We know that it's probably from China, considering they were studying bat-derived coronaviruses from rural regions of China, specifically Yunnan. They brought the bats. Shi Zhengli, the bat woman, the leader of the Wuhan Viral Institute, took bats from Yunnan in caves, found that it affected local populace with coronaviruses, brought them back to a lab,
in Wuhan,
studied them in
near
Wuhan,
that seafood market.
and then a viral outbreak happened. Then they posted on their job website that they needed help with finding out what the heck was going on with, well, just to study bat-derived coronaviruses.
Yeah.
And Peter, working with her, knows this.
Yeah.
He understands this fully, goes to Wuhan after a year with the WHO, and then tells the public, no, it's probably not from here. It's
probably
highly
dead
unlikely.
seafood.
It's probably dead
Particles
seafood.
of dead fish floating in the air. Ooh.
Go to the next slide.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Winston. I believe someone said that. I believe someone said that exact quote that you just said.
Somebody pretty
said
rich.
that.
It's pretty rich if you think that's the case.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a pneumonia outbreak associated with the coronavirus of probable bat origin. So this is put out by Shi Zhengli as well.
Yes.
Now Shi Zhengli again is the head of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. She's a head virologist. She's very talented. In fact, she was in Times One Most Important People or whatever. They're making a comic out of her. DC Comics is making a comic out of her.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Anyway, it's not her fault. Theoretically,
Sure.
I mean,
because no one wants a comic made out of them. It's not her fault for that. That's DC and its stupid direction it's been going these past couple of years.
True.
Anyway,
my point is, all of this can't. It's not. I mean, she said statements that I fully disagree with because the CCP makes her. Let's be honest. She's not. She can't be impartial in this scenario here. She should be murdered.
Yeah.
So she puts out a paper, all this kind of stuff. So we've established that Shi Zhengli, the bat woman, basically has proven that coronavirus comes from, it's a bat-derived thing. Yeah. Peter, who led the investigation in WHO, also a virologist, says this too.
Yeah,
okay?
he said that.
Now
he's changed his tune.
Well, now there's a huge problem with this. Okay. Yeah. There was all this mystery surrounding coronaviruses.
Yeah.
There's so much mystery surrounding this because they just don't know. The Chinese government says it's of utmost importance that we're very transparent about this. We allow the scientists to do their work, and let's keep politics out of this. Fair enough. I fully agree, CCP. Sure. Hand on heart, I totally agree with you. Unfortunately, that's just not the way it's gone.
No.
You didn't let anyone in. You didn't let private investigators in. You didn't let scientists come and do samples. You didn't let people talk to the virologists in the virology community around the world, except for the people that you bought out. Yeah. And that is my conclusion of this, is that the CCP bought out the WHO, and we saw that with Tedros.
Yeah.
And we saw it continue to happen when this bullshit investigation came through, to the point where BBC and all these other journalists can't even maintain normal journalistic integrity because it's so baffling, the stuff that they came and tried to feed the world with. To the point where world governments are rethinking this, going, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
You came out of this 1-year cover-up from the Wuhan Institute of Virology and said nothing happened.
Yeah, and it's probably
That's
seafood.
Bullshit. Yeah, and it's probably seafood.
Yeah.
And guess what? Peter, the guy that we're supposed to be trusting for this entire thing, he did an interview in December 2019, and I can't believe that this isn't made mainstream media yet, and it creeps me out that it hasn't. But what you're about to listen to is an interview with another virologist in December of 2019. Okay, guys?
Okay, bear with us. You got to watch this. Is a couple minutes. Please watch this.
But let me just say, it's going to need no explanation if you listen very carefully. This is weeks before the coronavirus pandemic. And what I want to say is, this is not him saying he knew that like this is going to happen in Wuhan and like this is a predetermined thing.
Yeah.
This shows you how much is known. When the whole scientific community talks about how dangerous coronaviruses are, how they can be manipulated, and then the WHO and a lot of people surrounding this whole Chinese propaganda thing says, no, everything's under control. It's tightly locked down. There's no human-to-human transmissibility. Sure. It's even difficult to manipulate, like this kind of stuff. Keep all of these things in mind when you listen to his interview weeks before the pandemic.
And also keep in mind that this is the guy who says it's probably like frozen food coming from another country.
Right.
All right, let's hit it.
on SARS, coronavirus emerged from a wildlife market and was the first pandemic of this century. So it's a big event. So we started to trace back from the wildlife market which species carried the virus that came into those markets. We found that it was bats, not civets was the original idea.
Right.
So then we started looking, where did they come from? And we went out to southern China and did surveillance of bats across southern China. And we've now found, after 6 or 7 years of doing this, over 100 new SARS-related coronaviruses, very close to SARS. Some of them get into human cells in the lab. Some of them can cause SARS disease in humanized mouse models and are treatable with therapeutic monoclonals, and you can't vaccinate against them with the vaccine. So these are a clear and present danger.
Yeah.
We've even found people with antibodies in Yunnan to SARS-related coronaviruses. So there's human exposure.
Right.
We're now doing surveillance. We're just beginning another 5 years of work to look at cohorts in southern China to say, well, how frequent does this spillover happen, and is it associated with disease? Because I expect, just like Nipah in Bangladesh, there are dozens and dozens of small spillovers going on the planet any one time, which we just never see.
Sure. Yeah, they never amplify. There are a few cases, and they're just absorbed in the illness, the overall illness of the population, right?
Now, you could say, so who cares? And that's one argument. But our strategy is any one of those could become pandemic. There's a lot of stochasticity in what happens then.
Yeah.
So if we look at all of them, understand patterns, try and reduce the number of spillover events, we've got
But if you're saying these are diverse coronaviruses and you can't vaccinate against them, there are no antivirals, what do we do?
Well, so I think that coronaviruses are pretty good. I mean, you're a virologist, you know all this stuff, but you can manipulate them in the lab pretty easily. It's just spike protein drives a lot of what happens with the coronavirus, zoonotic risk. So you can get the sequence, you can build the protein, and we work with Ralph Barrick at UNC to do this. Insert it into a backbone of another virus, and do some work in the lab. So you can get more predictive.
Yeah, okay. So I think that speaks volumes.
Yeah, I mean, like you guys, I posted, the link is in the description right now if you want to watch it. It's a fascinating interview.
Yeah.
Now, to super sum it up, they were very aware of bat-derived coronaviruses in Yunnan province in China.
Yes.
I had already read about that in all of Shizheng Li's reports. This is all online, guys. This is not some secret bullshit. This is online research papers, right? Yeah. Now, the bat-derived coronavirus thing, they found antibodies in people in China already because they had been exposed to it from bat crossover, right? Now, at this point, with the whole lab leak theory, with the whole fact that it could be zoological spillover, that needs to be left up to the scientists, right? Sure. The fingers are kind of pointing more in the direction at this point that it was probably a lab leak and it's not intentional.
Sure.
But with all of this hilarious rhetoric that the Chinese government was pulling, that coronaviruses can't be manipulated, that they said, Peter goes, they're easily manipulated.
Yes.
Coronaviruses, you can change the spike protein.
Yeah.
Coronaviruses are very hard to treat.
Yeah.
They're obviously very easy to cross over, right?
Yeah.
I saw some people in the comments that it's very important that I say this. When he said it can't be vaccinated against, and they're like, see, no. The whole point of viruses is when they go from zoological spillover from animal to human. Of course, you can't vaccinate against something that's only been in an animal.
Sure.
The virus mutates when it becomes a part of a human being. So you can vaccinate against a human virus. Coronavirus, COVID-19, what we're dealing with now, is a human virus now.
Sure.
You can't vaccinate against a virus that hasn't gone into a human yet. That's what he's saying. But anyway, the whole point is all of this rhetoric from day one, excusing everything that China had to do with this. It's very clear that coronavirus started in China. And it's not important to understand that because, China's dirty wet markets or something. No. The point is that we have to understand where the reservoirs are, how they come and have zoological spillover, and how they're being manipulated in labs where we don't necessarily have the best diplomatic ties with.
Sure.
Right? You can't have this massive super lab where people who are clearly bought out by China are the only people allowed to see what's going on. That's inhumane.
One thing I'd like to point out is right in the beginning of that particular segment we showed, he talks about how they traced back the original SARS coronavirus.
Sure.
Now, SARS, when it broke out, I was in China for the second outbreak of SARS, and it shook the world. And everybody, the world changed after that, especially in and around China. Every time you go in and out of Hong Kong, you have to be scanned for temperature and all that. They ramped the border up. The health stuff at the border big time, and it's permanently there now, and it always has been. Before that it wasn't. You could just walk in and out type thing. Now there's no issue with him talking about the fact that SARS originated in China and the fact that they traced it, because back then it wasn't this whole like political thing where they have to save face and not allow anyone to know that it came from China. They traced it from the wet markets, as he said, thinking that it was in civets or other things. They traced it all the way and found that it came from bats, most probably.
Probably in Yunnan.
Yeah. And so you can see there was actual science at work there.
And the Wuhan Institute of Virology was studying that very thing in Wuhan. And that's fine.
The problem is, now that it's all political, you've got these bullshit politics getting in the way of actual science that could have saved a hell of a lot of lives by
Millions.
now. That's the thing that people don't understand, is this stonewalling by the Chinese government. Never mind the fact they tried to cover it up in the beginning, which aided and allowed it to spread around the world and infect everyone. If we even take that out of the picture, if scientists from around the world were actually allowed to go into ground zero and figure things out right when it happened, right when the pandemic started to hit around the world, this could have been dealt with much quicker. A vaccine could have come out a lot quicker. People would have actually been able to work on this and be educated about this. We wouldn't have all this bullshit out there right now about anti-maskers and Trump's bad and this is bad and this is bad and what. It would have been like, guys, we actually have a pandemic that we have to deal with. The world comes together. Let's go find out. Let's find out where in China it came from, how it happened. Let's work on fixing the problem. Whoa. Okay.
So, guys, what you saw there was a clip from our podcast, which we had last Thursday. And I hope that you guys enjoyed it, because that's where we get to really speak our mind, especially on more newsworthy topics. You know, here in ADV China, we're more about the adventures and talking about things in generalities. But if there's something that's in the news or very important just to get it out there, you'll find it on our podcast every week, ADV Podcasts.
And not just in the news, stuff that we discover that the news is scared to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. And look, this is so important. The whole world is taking, you know, basically the attitude towards COVID-19, where it came from and all that, is hinging more or less on the testimony of this clearly confused, or well, I shouldn't say confused, but his loyalties are confused, clearly corrupted WHO official / scientist / asshole.
Or the entire organization. We don't know how deep it goes.
Yeah, but I think it's important for everyone to at least see this, because we're not hearing about it in the news. The mainstream media is not talking about his ties to China and to the lab, you know, to the extent that we are. They're not talking about the fact that he's contradicted himself in the past, just before this came out, you know, and that he's actually very possibly in some way responsible, I think, for what has transpired here.
And that remains to be seen, but the fallacies and the mistakes and the cover-up is what we can prove. And the cover-up is bullshit. This is bullshit. You don't excuse an entire lab leak theory right out of the get-go. And it's very clear when you have ties to that person and the lab, and then you give the WHO, or the WHO gives China a year to cover everything up. So you guys put your own pieces together.
Yeah, I mean, especially since he's actually been working on these bat-derived coronaviruses. He's been part of all of that in the past. He should know best that a lab leak or, you know, transmission from animal, you know, the spill-off thing is a possibility, because he's studied that before.
Right, in that exact location.
Yeah, in China, in the Wuhan lab, he took those samples there, or he's part of that.
Shi Zhengli did, but he was working with her on that. Yeah,
that's my meaning. It's like he's actually working on those specific things. So yeah, I think the world needs to look at Peter Daszak very closely. And I mean, he's just a linchpin in all of this, because at the end of the day, it is all the WHO, all these organizations that are basically covering for China and preventing. Yeah, they're preventing you know, the world from really figuring out what went on with the SARS coronavirus, the Wuhan coronavirus, and we need to just stop allowing people to pull the wool over our eyes, you know?
Yes, agreed.
Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. But yeah, please check out the podcast if you want updates on this.
Yeah,
because
definitely subscribe to the podcast. I think you guys, if you like what we do, then you'll love the podcast.
Yeah, and we don't want to blur the lines here because this channel's all about us riding our motorcycles, having these kind of conversations, and of course, as soon as the vaccine is, you know, out there, we'll be traveling around the world doing this, not just hanging around in the States.
Next place is Japan.
Yeah, but
I'm
I mean,
gonna rip past you.
this is our motorcycle adventure talk show on two wheels here. So if you want to see like a more news cycle type thing, go ahead and check it out on ADV Podcasts.
You got it.
Yeah, so, oh yeah, anything you want to tell our subscribers before we sign off?
Well, now we're going to enjoy these roads. So enough of the dour talk. Keep an open mind, and that's the most important thing. Is my takeaway for you guys is keep an open mind about all this stuff. We are not conspiracy theorists, but we are grounded in reality, and we see what China does, the Chinese government does to prevent reality from happening. And that's what's so infuriating, is we do understand what's going on. So keep an open mind about all this. Make sure that you are reading into it and pay attention to the scientific articles coming out like a wild firestorm right now about this whole situation. Let the scientists do their work and make sure you signal boost the real heroes that are actually doing the math behind this. But anyway, yeah, take it easy.
Yeah, and unlike Peter Daszak, you know, stay awesome.